Evening, everyone. I am Traci Johnson. I am the Program Officer for POISE Foundation. And welcome to our community conversation, Mind Always Matters. Tonight, we're going to be discussing what is the current state of mental health in Black Pittsburgh. And also, we wanted to check in with everyone as daylight decreases and temperatures drop, that often triggers seasonal depression. So during this conversation, we invite you to participate, share our posts, leave a comment, ask questions of our experts. Also, be sure to drop your emojis in the chat. We love those smiley faces and hearts. You can also support POISE's 40th anniversary. If you make a donation of at least $10 during this live stream or beyond, you'll be entered in for a chance to win a gift basket filled with self-care goodies made by and for Black women here in Pittsburgh. So if you love the body oils and scrubs and teas, if you want to take a nice little trip to a salon or a Black-owned spa, we encourage you to make that $10 donation. Tonight's expert panelists for our conversation, Mind Over Matters, includes Julius Boatwright, the founder of Still Smiling, and Ms. Jessica Gurley, owner of Social Work Consulting and Counseling, LLC. So we're going to start with Jessica. Jessica, I'd like you to take an opportunity just briefly to introduce yourself and share with our audience why this conversation is so important.
I think this conversation is so important because we all have mental health, and our mental health fluctuates very consistently. And I think we all can benefit from just doing better, feeling better. They say when you feel better, you're more productive, you're a better citizen, you contribute to the community in a better way. So, I think this is for everyone because of the fact that it impacts everybody. So I'm so happy to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, Jessica. We are happy to have you here with us tonight. And Julius, I want to give you an opportunity to briefly introduce yourself and also share the same question to you. Why is it important that we're having these conversations about mental health?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Julius Boatwright here. I am the founder of Still Smiling, a community-based nonprofit that focuses on bridging the gap between Black people and mental health support. And this conversation is just so important because it's timely and more Black folks are reaching out for support and speaking up and saying that they're ready to go to therapy. They're ready to take control of their own healing journey. So this is just a really powerful and important time, really in history, as it relates to mental health and wellness in the Black community and beyond.
Thank you, Julius. We are so honored to have you here tonight with us as well. So, I just want to kick off the conversation and acknowledge the elephant in the room, the stigma of mental health in the Black community. Um, Interestingly enough, I guess it was a few weeks ago, there was a Facebook post that was circulating about how our grandmothers, and some of us, who are older, our mothers, our great grandmothers, used to refer to, like, people as being touched, right? He's a little touched, she's a little touched, they're a little special, instead of using like proper medical terminologies. We also, live in times now where, like, Black women, feeling like, they're failing and constantly, just underproducing, but really it could be depression or anxiety. But we know that we have come a long way from, when our grandmothers and the old folks used to say they touched. We've come a long way from that now into, understanding better about mental health. But the question is, have we normalized it in the Black community? Is it more accepting? And even as I think about the faith-based community, like, uh, you didn't dare say mental health. You didn't dare say depression or anxiety. It was totally not accepted. You just need to pray more. Like, you didn't fast enough. You didn't pray enough today. That's the only thing that's wrong with you. So has it become more accepted now to have these discussions about mental health? And Jessica, I'll start with you.
So I think we have made more progress in terms of it having more of a presence, especially if you're on social media. We just had the big thing with the green flags, red flags, and just different things to look for when it comes to, protecting your mental health. And I love those type of things. I don't think it's a greater indication that we are doing the job that we need to be doing. I think mental health, we can say we did a good job when mental health is seen as just as important and seen as just as impactful as medical health, right? So everybody goes to their PCP every year. It's no stigma attached to that. People take insulin and medical medications. There's no stigma attached to that. And so to me, I measure if we have done extraordinary job when things are completely normalized and it's not taboo. As it relates to the older adults and those who did not participate or know about mental health and therapy, for me it was an education factor. We have to also remember that Black people was the only race that literally couldn't get an education. It was illegal for us to get an education. And so I think white supremacy as well as education played a major role in why we had to come up with these sayings and label things ourselves, right? But as we become more educated, we know what trauma is, we know what triggers is, we know what depression might feel like. I feel like we can then move past this stigmatizing language. From just seeing people and being in therapy with people since 2016, I know when people they know better, they do better, and I think we are seeing that a lot of people are doing better. And lastly, as it relates to Black women who are not recognizing their symptoms as depression or anxiety, again, I think that a lot comes from white supremacy in not knowing that you don't have to be resilient. You don't have to be beat over top of your head time and time again to realize your strength. That is something we have to get rid of in our community and realize, it's okay to seek help as soon as you have an inkling that you need the help that you need to get. So that's it.
Thanks, Jessica.
Mhm.
And so, Julie, it's the same question. Um, are we moving away from the stigma? Are we beginning to normalize getting mental health? Are we normalizing going to therapy now? Are we normalizing, if it's depression, naming it depression? Are we normalizing if it's anxiety, calling it that? Or are we still, calling it other things instead of naming what it is?
Yeah, I think that we are turning that corner. We are normalizing mental health within the Black community. And I always say, in order to create or change a narrative, you have to create that narrative, right? So if we can start to just say and really adopt that we are debunking stigma, we are eliminating stigma within the Black community, that's going to be the narrative that catches on, right? I think we're turning that corner, but we're still, sort of bringing it back to light that there is stigma. And I would argue that there's not anything necessarily wrong with there being a stigma. So maybe it's more about acknowledging that yes, stigma exists, but how can we create these conversations within Black spaces to comfortably and confidently talk about stigma and really explore it and unpack it? Because if we just sort of write it off as just stigma and that's the barrier and the roadblock, then we're never going to be able to get through it or get past it. So in Jessica, as a clinician, right, just with doing therapy with someone, the first step is really acknowledging, right? Acknowledging what it is that you want to address. And then from that acknowledgement comes a certain level of acceptance. And with that acceptance, you can start to change it, change your thoughts, change your behaviors, and change a collective narrative in a real way. So I would just encourage us to start saying stigma is there, but we are being intentional and deliberate as a collective about saying that, we're not going to let stigma stop us from educating ourselves and learning the right kind of language to use when we're talking about mental health and mental illness.
Julius, I love that, acknowledge the stigma and unpack it, right? Unpack that issue. And I want to go back to something that, Jessica, that you talked about, when you introduced, white supremacy and, us not being able to access proper education about things. But when I think about slavery, and how we were constantly told as a people that we were broken, that we weren't even a person. And it often makes me think that the stigma that we have associated with mental health or, those challenges of dealing with stress, depression, or anxiety, is that something that, if we look historically, it's birthed out of the fact that, we have constantly been told that we're broken somehow. And it's like, nope, we're not broken. We're not going to acknowledge that. We're going to embrace our strength and our resilience. So can you guys weigh in on that just a little bit?
Well, I can go first. So I agree. And I think that's the underlying issue that a lot of Black people have is that brokenness and not feeling worthy, not feeling heard. And racial trauma impacts everybody. It impacts the person, it impacts the community that they live in. And it also impacts their, everyday work lives as well. And so I think we have to really talk a lot about racial trauma and how it has contributed to the stigma. And we also have to be aware in ourselves when we feel like we're unworthy. Where does that foundation come from? Especially when we're watching a lot of trauma on the news and throughout social media, and a lot of it is racial trauma. It's telling us that we have these things and we have this brokenness. And I'm so glad that now we have communities where we can go and talk to a professional or talk to each other about how wonderful we truly are as a community. And that does impact mental health every single day. So I'm glad we are doing that.
Thanks. Julius?
Yeah, I would say, again, it's all about defining that narrative for ourselves as individuals and as a collective as well. So it's one thing to fully acknowledge and be mindful of the historical things that we've been through as a people. And those are things that we just cannot erase. They should not be erased, and they should be acknowledged in a real way in today's society and for decades and centuries moving on, because there was a significant amount of harm and pain that was inflicted upon Black folks. So we want to make sure we are acknowledging that and being mindful of it. I'm also I want us to be mindful of how we can reframe some of the things that we've experienced as individuals when we think about the trauma that we've experienced in our lives, whether it be racial trauma, work-related trauma, or just general trauma that we experience in life as Black folks. There is always something that we can glean from it and we can pull from it to be able to help us to be a better person, to become our best selves. And it may not always feel easy. In fact, it won't always feel easy. But I think it's important to be able to give ourselves the grace and space we need to work through trauma, whether we're doing it with a therapist, with a mental health professional, if we do it through some of our own self-care rituals and practices, but really being able to say, you know what, this traumatic experience or this set of traumatic experiences, it is heavy, it is painful, but I know that if I give myself an opportunity to work through it and to look at it from a different perspective, and I give myself an opportunity to grieve or to sit with whatever it is that I'm trying to navigate, there's something inside of those moments and those experiences that can help us become a better version of ourselves.
Thanks, Julius. Thank you, Jessica. So we have our first question from the chat that I want to throw out there. And Julius, we'll start with you. So the question from the chat is, can we sue the American Psychological Association? Based on a recent article, and this was just the early November article, where they actually apologized for institutionalized racism. And the writer says that, I believe mental health issues sometimes presents themselves differently in Black communities, having care that is centered around that could help more to seek help. And so with that question, can we sue the American Psychological Association? I want to also link that to, does mental health show up differently in our community? Does it look different? Right? Should we, actually, those who are with the American Psychological Association, along with, Black experts, go back and really start to look at, all of these, psychological issues and look at them differently from a Black perspective and through that lens of someone Black. So should we go back and start looking at that? And so, Julius, I'll start with you.
Yeah, that is an excellent question. Thank you to the folks out there in the digital world for putting that question forth. I think from a legal perspective, if you want to file a suit against someone, that's something that you can do if that's what you want to do. I would say that beyond that, though, when I think about what else we could do when it comes to the APA, it's where does accountability come into play in these conversations, right? So the lawsuit is one thing, potential suit is one thing, but if we're also talking about we want to see real change and we want to see the Black experience incorporated into these articles, this literature, these books, these reviews, then that is going to take an incremental change. It's going to take intentionality to get those things to start to move in the right direction. So it's going to take writing a letter. It may take filing a lawsuit. It may take calling folks who work within the APA. It may take partnering with people who have already published literature to say, hey, I see that you published something. I want to talk with you about, equity and how that's showing up in the writing or in some of the literature that's going out through the APA. So I don't necessarily see it as just a either or a black or white issue. I think it's a multi-pronged approach. And what I hear coming through with this question that one of our viewers is saying is it goes back to accountability, right? Like how do we as individuals and as a collective within the Black community hold these institutions, like these mental health, psychological, behavioral health institutions accountable for honoring the Black experience and not continuing to misdiagnose us or continuing to further perpetuate stigma within our community. So I think that's an excellent question. And I think it goes back to just holding folks accountable. We can do that a number of different ways, including a lawsuit, if that's your way of doing it.
Jessica?
I definitely agree with Julius, everything Julius said, and then also make sure we have our demands in there as well and make sure that we have some long-term impact and that we include amplifying Black voices and providers that are Black as well, because it's absolutely true that there are um, people who are misdiagnosed just because of the color of their skin. There's people who are very spiritual have been misdiagnosed as having psychosis or being bipolar just because they're very enthusiastic and they're into church and they want to pray and speak in tongue versus see a therapist and they've been misdiagnosed. Our Black boys are misdiagnosed with conduct disorder and behavioral disorders when they truly have autism. So there is a different experience for us, and we want to make sure that we amplify those providers that actually know the culture, have shared language with people in the community, so that we can, in the long run, not have these things happen in the future. So I wholeheartedly agree with everything Julia said, and I think that is a great question.
All right, thank you both. So, Jessica, I want to start with you. You have this amazing t-shirt line that you have created that focuses on combating some of these stigmas around mental health and talking about mental health and talking about suicide and going to therapy. And so I would just like to know, like, what made you decide to launch a t-shirt line? And I love your shirts. They are wonderful. That
Thank you.
encourages us to try therapy, right? And so so what encouraged you to want to do these t-shirts and launch this line?
So I actually was gonna wear Try Therapy today, but I need to wash it. But it started from I realized coming into this field, there's not enough of us. There's not enough of Black therapists. I think there's 3 or 4% of us, and we are not the gatekeepers of mental health advocacy. I mean, sometimes. It is an issue when you go to a mental health event and there's no licensed professionals there. That is an issue. So don't get me wrong, but anybody can advocate for mental health long as they have that basic foundation. So I said, how can I turn a community of people into mental health advocates, and how can I make it loud and accessible to everybody or anyone who wanted to be one? So my goal was to basically amplify, mental health and therapy, and get into those spaces where I could never get to because there's only one of me, right? And so, what I'm asking people to do is to wear the shirts, have a discussion with people who may approach you, and try to normalize. Just in talking about mental health and therapy. And, I've had some feedback that some people say, I don't want to be a billboard for therapy. And I get it. But, sometimes, we're also billboards for Nike and Adidas. And so why not be a billboard for a great cause? And I literally have testimonies of people inboxing me saying, I went to therapy because I seen your shirts. And so that's the ultimate goal, and we're going to keep on this, keep working on that goal. And if you ever want to be a part of the goal, just all you got to do is go to the website.
So, for our audience, those out there who are watching with us tonight, if you want an opportunity to win one of Jessica's t-shirts, because we want you to win, because she's giving away t-shirts, y'all. She don't have to give them things away, so she's giving away a t-shirt, y'all. So, if you want an opportunity to win a t-shirt, then we are asking you to like this post, to share it, and to tag a friend. So we want you to go back, and like tonight's conversation, share it on your social media channels, and tag a friend, and you will be entered into a drawing so that you can win one of Miss Jessica's t-shirts, her Try Therapy t-shirts. They are wonderful. I have seen them all around Pittsburgh, and so you definitely want to be
Yeah.
able to get your hands on one of these t-shirts. And so, Julius, I want to talk to you a little bit about your organization, Still Smiling, in which you guys are working to connect every Black person in Allegheny County to a positive mental health experience, to improve their quality of life. Because we know not every mental health experience is positive. So, you guys are working on that. And so I'm curious to know, how is your mission and your work being received?
Yes, thank you for lifting that up, Tracy. It is being received uh, exceptionally well. It's one of those things that when we get out into the communities, into Bells Hoover, Wilkinsburg, Homewood, Larimer, the Hill District, when we get out into these communities, one of the most powerful things that we're realizing is that Black folks are already saying we've wanted mental health support a long time ago, right? It's not something that's new, and that's another one of those myths and misconceptions that I want to encourage us to challenge is that Black people are just now starting to be mindful of healing and working on our wellness journey. We've been healing since the beginning of time, right? When we talk about racial trauma and the history of all the things that we've experienced at an individual and a collective level, we had no choice but to heal and cope and deal with the atrocities that we were dealing with. But in these communities, folks are saying, yes, we're ready for this. I already have the gifts, I have the passion, I have the relationships. All I need is just a little bit of support, some training, some peers around me that I can trust and I can have conversations with about mental health and how to support each other and how to practice self care. And now that we are just uplifting those natural resources that are already in our communities, and there are our people, our most precious resources, our people. Folks are saying, you know what, this is something I could see myself doing. I wasn't in the mental health field. I didn't think about doing something like this before, but now that I'm being exposed to learning about how to understand the different signs and symptoms of mental health and mental illness, now that I'm learning more about trauma and how it impacts relationships within families and intimate partner relationships, now that I'm learning about how our children and youth within our communities are navigating mental health and their own wellness, I want to step up. I want to be an advocate. I want to make referrals. I want to make sure that one by one, neighborhood by neighborhood, I can be a part of that solution and helping our people heal. So it is being received exceptionally well, and I just see that continuing to trend in that direction well into the future.
That is amazing to hear. That is really amazing to hear. And so I want to transition just a little bit. Like in our Black community, we know that our stories are stories of perseverance, they are stories of resilience. And so many of us, and I say the collective us, have learned to survive sadness. We have learned to survive trauma. And just to throw this stat out here, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office of Minority Health says that we are 20% more likely to report serious psychological distress than our white counterparts, but we're less likely to seek out treatment. And if we do, we're more likely to end that treatment prematurely. Why? Like we can acknowledge there's a problem. We don't often seek help, but when we do, we don't follow through on that help. So, from based on your experience, what's happening? And Jessica, I'll start with you.
So I'm not going to speak as if I have the full answer, right? I think it's a very complex question. But from what I've seen or heard from people is that number one, they want a therapist that looks like them. As I've already stated, there's only 3 to 4% of us, and so it's very hard to find somebody, African American. If you want a male or female, then that narrows it down even more. So that can be an issue. And then also, I think we have to be honest about the fact that not every you're not going to match with every therapist that you come across. So then you have that lowers your chances even more because you might not mesh well with the first one. And so if you're already going through the stress, depression, anxiety, you might not want to go looking for a second and third one. So I completely understand that. But that's why I always, every single event I speak at, I talk about the fact that it took me at least 5 different therapists. I went to 5 different therapists to find the one that I have now. And I know that sounds like a lot, but organizations like Still Smiling, Taraji P. Henson's organization, Men to Heal, they're doing the work for you to help people find therapists. And that is really helpful. They'll do the legwork for you. And so that's why we need to uplift those different organizations because it can be exhausting. Another thing is again we talked about the misdiagnosis. not feeling understood, not having shared language. Black people are not all the same, so black therapists aren't going to be the same. So sometimes you get in there and you don't feel like you have a shared experience with that person. So what I always say is black people love therapy, and we can just tell by the other activities that they do. So, they go to barbershops and they talk about all their issues and they're laughing and joking. And you'll talk to people and they say, that's my therapy. Even though it's not trauma focused therapy, they love to talk about their issues. They like to, talk to their peers. So, the very basic foundation of therapy is that. And so we know that Black people love therapy, as Julia stated, or love mental health or are interested in mental health. Sometimes they just don't make the connection and know that's what they're doing. And sometimes it just don't work out because of the other barriers that are in place. And last but not least, I always want to amplify the fact that, you know, for some reason people still think we have in everybody has insurance for some reason. And so that also limits your search when I have to um, look within the network of an insurance company. So that's a very complex question, but if I had to narrow it down, that would be my top things.
And so, Julius, I have a question for you. Um, Being that, we are in a season of double crises with COVID-19, anti-Black violence, and people are just, waiting and trying to brace themselves for the next tragedy to strike. Um, and, according to psychologists, racial trauma is a form of race-based stress that, refers to like, real and perceived experiences of racial discrimination that lead often to PTSD. And it's ongoing. It's not something that, is a one time thing, it's continuous. And so, do you believe that we are not, as a people, acknowledging the amount of racial trauma that we are experiencing? And how can we start to move from that and get more on a path towards peace?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would start by saying I believe that as a people, we are acknowledging the magnitude of the racial trauma that we've been experiencing, and just to note, where this pesky pandemic, right? We're like, are we coming out of a pandemic? Are we still in a pandemic? However we choose to define it, the remnants of the pandemic are still with us, particularly Black and Brown folks, right? We're still, in terms of the percentages of folks within the Black and Brown community who have experienced job loss, who have experienced the loss of a relationship that was important to them, loss of income. So we're dealing with all of these things that we're having to grieve: financial loss, relationship loss, and that is being piled on top of the racial trauma, the historical racial trauma and the current racial trauma. So I'm just giving that context to say, um, I want to just encourage us to extend as much grace to ourselves as possible. I was watching um, a podcast the other day, and they were just talking about, they were giving some commentary on the current trials that are happening, right? And it feels eerily similar to 2020, right? It feels eerily similar with some of these narratives that we're hearing, the ridiculousness that we're seeing in these courtrooms, with the judges, and just the way that these narratives are unfolding. So that is just continuing to add also, to the racial trauma. So I add that additional piece of context to say that, you mentioned that, moving from sort of the pain to the peace part. That is a long road, right? So we may only move a tenth of the way, but that's a big part of that journey. It may not feel like it, but it is a huge part. So just acknowledging that we're making it through a pandemic, we're rising up against all of the racial trauma we've experienced, and peace is along the way, right? I don't look at peace as a destination. How do we find peace along the way? I think is a more important thing for us to consider as a collective.
I like that, finding peace along the way and peace not being a destination. I love that. And so I'm going to pose this question to both of you. Therapist Resma Menukem said, trauma in a person could look like personality over time. Trauma in a family could look like family traits over time. Trauma in people could look like culture over time. Have we started to normalize trauma? And if we are, what are give me like two concrete things that we can do to start to move from trauma to triumph? And Jessica, I'll start with you.
So I see this two different sides. So trauma is very prevalent in the Black community, and so I don't want to minimize that. And because trauma is defined by the person, I can't tell a person what their trauma is. For the most part, because trauma is as small as somebody screaming at you at work, to as big as having an incident of rape or sexual violence. So from that perspective, trauma is going to be prevalent, and it's going to be something that we see from a lot of people because it does happen a lot. And so I think we have to first be very specific about what trauma is. And especially if you take that incident of being screamed at every day and it makes you look at the world view as the world is bad and people are bad and, I'm unworthy, that then becomes a mental health issue. So small incidents can turn into trauma for people. But I do think, not just Black people, just people in general are starting to use mental health words in everyday language inappropriately, saying that that's my OCD messing up or that's my PTSD messing up. And they truly don't mean that. I think that is inappropriate and that does happen. And it does minimize the experience of those who truly have those diagnoses. And so we should be careful when using that type of language, or especially the word bipolar. A lot of people say, or they like to say the weather is bipolar. Again, that's very offensive and it does minimize that diagnosis, which is very, very severe. So what we can do is, just always keep those things in mind that there are truly people out there that have those diagnoses. And every time you do that, you minimize their symptoms, you minimize their experience. So try not to use diagnosis as objectives or adjectives, and try not to use it in your everyday language. That would be very helpful. Um, and then also just being very vocal if you do want to have the conversation around trauma, also go further and talk about how it impacts your daily living skills and how it impacts your life. So it doesn't seem like trauma is just everywhere with everything, but it can be something. What is traumatic to one person might not be traumatic to another person, and I think that alone is more of an issue or concern for me. And so I'm happy to see all the conversations around trauma. We just have to make sure we're just really careful with our everyday language around it.
Thanks, Jessica.
Hmm.
Julia, same question.
Yeah, so I will speak from a place of just personal experience in my own journey, talking about going from pain to peace and how I've been finding peace along the way. So for me, I got so comfortable in a place of defining myself by my trauma. My trauma had become my identity so much to the point where when people would ask me about how I was doing or how things were going with work, or to even just, well, tell me a little bit about yourself, Julius, I would always start with the trauma and from a place of deficit and the pain and the difficult life experiences that I had was either going through at the time or that I had gone through or were still trying to overcome and make sense of. And so I've just been doing a lot of spiritual work. I've been working on my own mental health and wellness. And in doing that and being intentional about that journey, I've started to peel back those layers of how I was letting the trauma that I've gone through define me, how I was literally getting attached to these traumatic experiences. And regurgitating these stories over and over and over, because that's all I was giving myself an opportunity to talk about. And now at this part of my journey, I'm separating myself from the trauma, and it's very, very difficult. That is why healing and going to therapy and working on your mental health and wellness is so difficult, because it puts you in a position to ask, who are you without all these things that happen to you, right? And so now I'm going through that journey, and I'm starting to uncover who I am beyond my trauma. And it's a lot of work. So I would just encourage us to um, look, if we're trying to figure out who we are and the essence of our humanity as individuals, we have to look beyond our trauma, not negate it, not pretend like it didn't happen, but try to look beyond it and ask ourselves, well, who am I when I'm not centering my trauma? Who am I when I'm centering my joy? Who am I when I'm centering my happiness? And start from there.
I like that. I like that. And Jessica, I know you have something that you want to add, so I definitely want to bring you back in.
Sure. So I 100% agree with Julius, and I definitely want to let people know because I think a lot of people believe that therapy is all about crying and letting out trauma. But we also, we have childhood. We A lot of us have our childhood trauma, but we also have childhood strengths as well. So a part of therapy is also unpacking your childhood strengths and thinking about before the trauma happened. Who were you? And I 100% agree with Julius. It's about figuring out who are you outside of the diagnosis, what your desires are, what truly genuinely makes you happy. And that's how I've helped a lot of people overcome the diagnosis or the racial trauma that they were going through, or the addiction and things of that nature, is doing a deep dive into who were you before the world got to you and told you you were unworthy. What did you want to do with your life before somebody told you what you're supposed to do? And one thing that's very interesting with the current grind culture that's going on, I've had to ask clients, why do you want to make six figures? What does that mean to you? How does that help you? Where did that come from? And sometimes they think about the fact that the foundation was just hearing it from somebody else, and that they really just want to be a freelance artist for the rest of their life. So I definitely agree that how we get to that triumph is looking to who am I when I'm by myself, and what do I enjoy when I'm by myself and nobody's there to tell me who I should be. And I think that's definitely how we get somewhere.
Thank you both.
Hmm.
And so you both alluded to many times during the conversation about lack of um, the lack of Black mental health professionals. We definitely need more. Um, we know that Black people only make up about 3 to 4% of mental health professionals. And we know that it's critical to have, to be able to have those who look like us and who are culturally competent. And so I'm wondering, is there anything that's being done to attract people to this field? Whether it's young people, whether it's people who are like, looking to make a career transition, whether it's even clergy, right? Because, just because you're clergy doesn't mean you need to be messing with anybody's mental health. You need to be trained, right?
Hmm.
So whether it's clergy, that's looking to do more counseling, um, is there, and even if it's not, is there training that's available for, our European brothers and sisters who don't look like us, to help them to become more culturally competent, where they can understand like the impacts of racism and microaggressions? How are we attracting those that look like us? And then also, what is available to educate those who don't look like us? And Julius, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I would say I want to give a shout out to, excuse me, to Gwen's girls, to Dr. Elliott, and to Wanda and their team. They're doing some like earth moving work around giving young Black girls an opportunity. We're talking teenage young Black girls an opportunity to talk about mental health and wellness through different like multimedia outlets. So they're producing these podcasts. They are and they're talking about mental health amongst their peers in a way that I could have never imagined when I was 14 years old. I didn't even know what mental health was when I was 14 years old. So, and I want to lift that up and lift up the work of Gwen's Girls because that kind of stuff is happening in Pittsburgh. It's happening throughout Allegheny County, and it's happening in pockets across the country. Right? It just doesn't always get lifted up. So, yes, young folks are being exposed. They're being given an opportunity to talk about mental health, and before you know it, that leads people down a pathway of I may want to pursue this as a career. I may want to go to school for this, right? So I think the earlier we can get that kind of information and those kind of opportunities in front of young Black kids in particular, the better opportunity we have for further diversifying the workforce. And the last part I want to add is that I am a strong proponent of how can a peer serve to support like the mental health and wellness of Black folks. So a peer is somebody you can become certified as a peer in Pennsylvania, and you can provide like mental health sort of adjacent services. So you're not providing therapy, you're not giving any diagnosis, but you're doing those things within the Black community that help people. You're connecting them to resources. You may spend that 2 or 3 hours having a conversation with them outside of their therapy appointment. You're visiting with people in the community and maybe listening to them as they talk about what happened in their therapy session, right? They may follow up and process with you as a peer. So I just would wrap that up and say that the more Black folks that we can get certified in these peer roles, I think that will help to take some of the pressure off of the limited number of licensed Black mental health professionals that we have. It's not the answer, but I think it could be a really big part of a short term solution until we're able to start graduating more people into the field.
Thank you, Julius. Jessica, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. So there's definitely a lot of organizations and also Facebook groups dedicated to new upcoming therapists. I'm in a couple. There's Black Girls in Social Work. There's Black Therapists Rock, and they actually have thousands, probably like 16,000 members or more each. And they actually provide training and tell, they encourage. And these ones are really dedicated towards Black women, but I'm pretty sure there's some male groups too where they help them and provide them education and support in going through that process of becoming a therapist because it can be very expensive. You have to pay for supervision, and so those type of organizations also are offering free supervision to become a therapist to get your license and things. So these things do exist, and I want to acknowledge that. And I want to acknowledge that we are creating some of our own solutions, and that's a beautiful thing because often the narrative is we don't do enough for our own community, and far too often that's louder than the actual support that is going on. So one thing I will say about the shortage of therapists of color. Um, Again, it took me 5 therapists to find one. I did end up with a white male, and that person allowed me to say my things and in the way that I wanted to say it. He was culturally competent. He asked questions instead of assume my experience. So you are capable to find somebody that is not a person of color. So I don't want you to not start your journey because you hear that about that shortage. And there might not be a therapist in your area. You might have to therapist shop, and that's okay. But I do think a lot of Black therapists are uplifting up and coming people who want to be a therapist, and there's a lot of programs out there. Even Black Men Heal and some of the other therapy programs that help people get free therapy. They also have interns that they are given free supervision to, and they're uplifting those up and coming therapists as well. So there's a lot of organizations trying to do their part.
Okay, great. So I just want to lift up a couple of questions from the chat. Um, Someone wrote during an internship program um, for um, designed for a youth opportunity. How can someone not in the mental health field differentiate between mental health issues and lack of interest in the program to handle appropriately? Um, so Julius, I'll throw that question to you. So how is, like, someone differentiating, like, between, like, yes, I understand, these mental health issues, to, like, I just really don't have any interest in this. So and they don't have a mental health background.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question correctly.
Yeah,
Could you repeat it just one more time?
sure. So this is what is written. Let's see. Um Okay, she's being asked to clarify her question a bit so we can have better clarity. So, but here's another question. So Jay asks, how much does someone need to tell the person who is answering the call?
Hmm.
If you decide to make that call for therapy, how much do you need to tell the person who's answering the call? What should you be looking to share with them? How much do you need to share? So, Julius, I'll throw that back your way.
Sure. Yeah, I think for me, it always comes back to what the person who's seeking support is comfortable with. I
Mhm.
mean, the agency or the organization, they can have different, not they can, they will likely have different processes and information that they're collecting. Now, there should be some standard information that people are collecting on that initial call, but it's going to vary depending upon what agency or organization you talk to. So, right, I may call one day to get connected with a therapist, and I just may not be in the best mood that day, right? So I may not want to, when someone says, well, tell me about this, I may not want to share that information, even though that's what the intake assessment form is telling this person on the other line to get from me. I may just say, you know what, I just wanted to make the initial call today.
Mhm.
Um, can we get through the rest of it another day, right? And it is the person's job who's on the other end of that phone to be able to meet the community member where they are, right? It's not to be coercive, not to force you to feel like you have to give all of the information right away. That saying, the customer, the client is always right, that is like the truth when it comes to therapy, right? Like you,
Mhm.
Jessica, I think mentioned it earlier. You don't have to stay with the same therapist. You can shop around. So that initial phone call, I would say, whatever the person is most comfortable with sharing at that point, then that's what they share. It may mean that there may be another follow up call to get the rest of the information,
Mhm.
but you shouldn't be forcing yourself to divulge all this information if it's just going to put you, in a worse position. So um, the customer and the client is always right.
So, Jessica, I have this question for you.
Mhm.
How can someone get help quickly after a traumatic event or after they finally decide to call someone? What should be like the expected turnaround? Like, if I need to talk to someone quickly, how can that move quickly instead of linger, right? Because I might not have 24 hours. I may
Mhm.
need to talk to somebody, like, right here in 24 minutes or 2.4 minutes. So how can someone get help quickly?
So, I mean, you always can call the National Crisis Line and somebody has to answer. You can also text the National Crisis Line too. So you don't necessarily have to get on the phone with them. And they do text right away. Any resource that I provide, I actually tried it out just to make sure it works. So I've texted the crisis line and they got right back to me. So if you are in a mental health and you just need to talk to somebody, you always want to call the national crisis line. If it's a situation where you feel like you're literally going to hurt yourself or somebody else, you need to go to the nearest emergency room. All emergency rooms are trained to deal with mental health emergencies, and I don't mean that they're going to be empathetic or they're going to be well versed in mental health, but they are the gatekeepers to get crisis a crisis treatment, like for if you feel like you need to get a psych stay, which is nothing wrong with that. If you need to get a psychological evaluation, you need to see a professional right away. You can go to any emergency room. There's other crisis mental health crisis numbers as well, that you can call. I think somebody already had put it in the chat. And so if you Google that, there's a lot of different crisis lines that you can call and get help immediately. Now, when it comes to getting therapy, that's a whole nother story. The turnaround time for that can vary. A lot of people are full with waiting lists. So that's why it's also good to kind of utilize, places like Still Smiling and other places that can connect you with people. And I hopefully this is not the situation forever, but that's all I can offer at the moment.
Thank you, Jessica. That is
Mhm.
super helpful. So, Julius, this is a question for you because I guarantee you, Jessica and I can't answer it. So here,
Mhm.
so here it is. Um, so one of our audience members wrote, "What do you think of expressions such as toughen up, man up? Why are men still not allowed to show they can be vulnerable?"
That's a question. um, I feel like I've been kind of playing contrarian this whole time, and I'm gonna stay with that, but in a good way though. I believe that some of my favorite words, and this is me as a man. Some of my favorite words are vulnerability, are sensitivity, um, empathy, like Jessica was talking about. Those are some of my favorite words, and I know that that is not always the case when it comes to navigating these conversations. As a man, and so again, I would just say when it comes to this narrative, I would maybe just try to encourage us to reframe it. There are a lot, and I'm gonna keep the focus on Black men, especially over this past year, really throughout the pandemic. I've seen so many Black men step up and say, you know what, to their elders, to their peers, and to even the little Black boys looking up to them, like it's okay for you to cry. It's okay for you to be sensitive. It's okay for you to be gentle with yourself and with others. And I see that happening more and more. And just because you're crying or you're gentle or you're sensitive, it doesn't mean you're not a provider. It doesn't mean you're not strong. It doesn't mean you're weak. It actually does equate to strength. So I would say that more Black men and more Black boys and more of our Black elders are being um, intentional about sharing our emotions and getting in touch with our emotions. We just maybe we're not celebrating those narratives as much, but it's happening. I'm seeing it, and I'm one of them.
Thank you, Julius. I have one final question for each of you. I could literally talk to you guys all day. We can keep talking about this topic and never exhaust everything that needs to be talked about. Because as you think about mental health, you also have to think about self care. How does that tie into the picture?
Mhm.
So there's so much that we can talk about. But I want us to go back because we talked about the importance of therapy and, about having a therapist. And Julius, I love that you shared, like, having that certified peer that can connect you to resources or just listen when you need to talk. They're not diagnosing anything, but like, they can just be a listening ear. Um, but I want you guys to think about and share with us, for those who aren't ready to make that appointment, to make that phone call, to have that, peer that, they can, just talk to or who's able to connect them to resources. how can they start to begin their journey? And could you share with us 2 to 3 practices that someone who is like, yeah, I want to heal, but I'm not comfortable yet stepping into therapy. I'm not comfortable yet, calling, a hotline and, perhaps talking to a stranger. I'm not comfortable yet, having this peer, there's reservations. They are still, there's still stigma there. What are 3 practices, 3 actual things, 2 or 3 that they can do in order to start their healing journey? And Jessica, we'll start with you.
Sure. So, first thing, I did create a free journal on my website. It's downloadable to anybody who needs it. Any therapist can download it to give it to their clients. Any school can download it to give it to their clients. And so, journals is a very good way to get back in touch with you. It's the time that you can take to just focus on you and your thoughts. And really get back to what you love about yourself. And it also helps you bring up some truthfulness. Once you see some things written on paper, it really helps you be honest, more honest with yourself, and being honest with yourself can be healing in itself. So I would recommend, look up different therapist journals, and again, I have one on my website. The second thing is,
Can you give
if
us
you're
the
not,
website really quick, Jessica?
it's www.mht-shirts.com.
Thank you.
All right. And so that's one thing you can do is journaling. I journal myself, even as a therapist. It's one of the most therapeutic things I can do every week for myself to keep myself grounded. The second thing is, if you don't feel comfortable with therapy, I would say listen to a therapist podcast. I've listened to a couple therapist podcasts, and I feel like if somebody who's never had therapy listen to a therapist podcast that they can resonate with, that's more likely going to help them go to therapy or feel like, they kind of know how that realm works. And so, again, just listen to some of the things they talk about might make you feel more comfortable to take that step. And I would say the last thing, if you're not really ready to dig into everything and really go through your different traumas, is to start meditating. Meditating is really good for you. You can find meditation videos all throughout YouTube, and they really help with just getting you grounded and again being with yourself, because everything starts with self. Um, how you feel about yourself is going to determine how you show up in the world. How you think is going to determine how you show up in the world. How positive or negative you think is going to determine your behaviors and how you interact with others. And so meditation just helps you sit with yourself. It helps ground you. It helps get rid of anxiety. Not completely, like if you have the diagnosis, but if you have moments of anxiety, it can be really helpful for that. So I would say with those 3 practices, that might help you get to that point.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Julius, give us your top 3. What are those hardcore practices that we can utilize to begin our healing journey?
Yes, I would say if you are not ready to heal, number one, just acknowledge and start to do some self exploration around why, or just start to do some self exploration. You don't necessarily have to define why, but just start to explore some of those things that you feel like might be making you apprehensive or hesitant. Do you want to learn more? Do you need to build a relationship with somebody who's a mental health professional? Do you want to read up on some books? Do you need to process a negative experience that you had before when you were going through more formal ways of your healing with therapy? So acknowledge and do that self exploration. Secondly, I would say I want to give a shout out to the good brother Leon Ford. He has a self care handbook that he has. If someone can look that up, I don't know the name of it, but if you're in the city of Pittsburgh and beyond, Leon Ford is just a phenomenal human being, and he took some time out of his life to document some of his gems and some of the things that he used on his healing journey over the past 5 to 7 years, really over his lifetime. So look into Leon Ford's self care toolkit and handbook. And then lastly, I would say for me, um, when I think about my journey with mindfulness and how I'm navigating mindfulness and being present and being aware, I'm just doing. I'm always encouraging myself and reminding myself that what's in front of me is not what's important. What's behind me is not what's most important, but where I am right now is what's most important. The colors, the smells, just what's around me. And the more I can focus on the present, the less I'm worried about what's going to happen in the future or what happened in the past that didn't go my way. So just remind yourself to be present as much as possible.
Thank you guys so much. I'm just awed by the knowledge that sits here this evening and what you all shared with us. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation, sharing your experiences, sharing your knowledge, and just really sharing your passion. For mental health and for us to all be able to come to a place of triumph and a place of peace or have those peaceful experiences because peace may not be a destination, but we can have it along our journey. So, thank you both so much. And
Mhm.
as we talked about this evening, some practices that we can do in order to, begin to heal and begin to address our trauma. One of those practices, as Jessica mentioned, was meditation. And so we have invited Dr. Lovey Foster to join us this evening. She is a wellness practitioner with a mission to love, inspire, and empower self love, which is so needed during this time. Many people feel scared, anxious, or confused, but talking to a therapist and creating space for healing activities like this can offer a great deal of support. So, we are now going to take a moment to be kind to ourselves so you guys can feel free to close your eyes, relax, and lighten your load as we all carry the torch. And thank you so much to our panelists and to our audience for tuning in and for your wise words from our panelists. And be sure to keep this conversation going online and in person. If you have not made your $10 donation to Poise, we encourage you to make that $10 donation. We encourage you again to like this post, to share it, to tag a friend so that you can win that t-shirt from Jessica. And Dr. Lovey, we thank you so much for joining us again. You were here with us during the last conversation and it was amazing, so we thank you for being with us here again.
It's so good to be with you all on this evening where we are creating sacred space, taking time out for healing, for wellness, for affirmation that we are whole, that we are healthy, and that we are well. All is well within us. And we're going to create this sacred space just by drawing attention to ourselves, our connection to our mind, body, and spirit, paying attention to those places that may have some sense of discomfort, some sense of pain, some sense of grief or loss, and breathing into ourselves health, wholeness, and wellness. Connection to ourselves, our spirits, our minds, our bodies, and to our Creator that created no mistakes. So let's just get into a comfortable seated position. You can also choose to lie down, but get into a deeper place of comfort. And just begin to draw attention to your own breath, just as it naturally occurs, the rise and the fall. Feel your belly rise and fall. Feel your chest rise and fall. And maybe you feel it in your shoulders as you breathe in and out and in and out. And as we begin to set our intentions for creating a sacred space, just think about fully accepting who you are, what you are, and where you are. This place of purpose, a place of growth, and a place of healing. And get excited about it. This is an exciting opportunity, another moment in time to draw closer and more connected to you, your inner being and your inner purpose. In these next few moments, I invite you to find more comfort, find more peace in this sacred space. And we'll start by taking 3 collective breaths. So place your hands on your heart or in prayer pose. And we're going to inhale deeply and exhale completely. 3 long, deep breaths together. So ground down through your bum bum. Lengthen through your spine and relax your shoulders down. If you're safe and in a comfortable space, you can close your eyes or cast your gaze down. And we'll inhale together and exhale together. Inhale a long, deep breath. Let it flow all the way up to your crown and exhale together. Last time, inhale and exhale. With gratitude for this present moment, I invite you to keep your eyes closed as we meditate together, connecting to those deep places of our hearts, a place where we find the sacredness of love, a space where love starts and a space where love grows. Let's feel into our hearts and tune into our bodies, our hearts, our minds, and our spirits, asking the question, what do I need in this moment in time? Not yesterday, not tomorrow or the next day, but right here in this present moment, what do I need? Let's touch our own hearts with softness, with empathy, with kindness. Let's caress our hearts with compassion, with grace, with patience, and with full acceptance. Let us bless and highly favor ourselves. God has made us in his image, perfect in his image. So we embrace that spirit of unity and oneness right now, embracing the perfection rather than focusing on anything that we've done wrong or anything that's not quite right, but embracing yourself fully and completely, getting into the mindset of full acceptance. In our sacred space, we are acknowledging that we are here on purpose. You are not a mistake. The Creator saw to it that you would be born, that you would cry and you would laugh, that you would drink and you would eat, that you would crawl, that you would walk, that you would run. So we acknowledge in this moment, in this sacred space, that our joys and our pain exist, that we are strong and we are ready to walk into the daylight of awareness. We don't negate that we've been through some hard times, that the trauma lives in us alongside the resilience, that the passion lives within us sometimes because of the pain. As we become aware, we become more self-connected and more self-accepting. So continue to breathe throughout this meditation, inhaling that sacred breath and exhaling. Inhale as you touch your heart, both physically and spiritually. And exhale. Breathing in healing. Breathing in wholeness. Breathing in wellness. And breathing in joy for who we are and what we are. Created in the image of the Creator. Let us feel as if we feel the sun on our skin. Let us touch those deep places of our heart, feeling the warmth of the brightest, warmest African sun in our face, on our shoulders, on our chest, in our belly, on our thighs, on our knees, on our shins, and on our feet. Walk in the warmth of the healing sun. Let it color your skin with the beauty of life, with the pain of life, with the joy of life, with the ashes, and with the fire that sparks our passion and keeps us going in spite of what we've been through. We are on this journey, not alone, but together, one with ourselves, gaining this deep connection as we sit together in this sacred space to meditate, one with our Creator as we accept the beauty with which we were created, the passion and the purpose that was put in you by the Creator. And we sit in the warmth of the glow of the sun as we connect to one another, our community of sisters and brothers, mothers and fathers, and our sacred children. Let's take this moment and breathe life into ourselves. We start there, breathing deeply and exhaling everything that does not serve us well. Asking ourselves, what do we need in this moment in time? And accepting that that is just right. And we exhale to provide a sacred space to fill that need, to grow our compassion for ourselves, and then extend that compassion out to our community, our family members, our partners, the generations before us, and the generations that come next. Feel into your body and let go. Begin to let go of anxiety. Begin to free yourself of the tension that comes with so much of what we experience. And breathe in freedom. Breathe in hope. Breathe in all those things that make you this amazing, resilient human being. And embrace those strengths. And as we breathe in deeply, let's exhale and expel completely. Inhale. Put a smile on your face as you do, and exhale. And inhale. And exhale. Feel deeply into this sacred space to heal and thrive and grow. And know that you are in the right space, in time, that you are in the right place, in your body, in your heart, in your mind, and in your spirit. You are in the sacred space, a space where you are growing in your connection to yourself, learning who you are and what you need. You are where I go to hide. Yes. When the wind starts to blow. Inhale and exhale. When the lightning starts to strike. When the thunder starts to roll. When this life becomes a fight. You are where I put my gloves down. When I'm running out of time. You are where I go to slow down. You are my favorite place. You are my sacred space. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Inhale and exhale. Where I go to be moved. Where I go to be still. Your love makes me new. In your presence I heal. You are my favorite place. You are my sacred space. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Inhale and exhale. No war, no war, no cause, no weapons formed, no law. What for you where I go to hide. You are where I go to heal. You are where I go to feel. To remember what is real. Ooh. You are my favorite place. You are my sacred space. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Thank you for spending this time in this very sacred space. May you be blessed with more moments to mind what matters. Namaste.